Hi, old James here. Now, this isn't actually going to be a typical review of the All In Wembley show yesterday as I record this because, one, I was there. Two, I'm incredibly tired because not only did I drive there, I drove back same day. So that was about 8 hours driving, and I haven't had my full quota of sleep. So also, I've not actually watched the show back on pay-per-view either. So everything I'm about to say are all my personal recollections of the event. I'm probably going to miss a load of stuff, but I'm also going to give you, hopefully, a bit of an idea on what it was like to be there. So, first thing is first. Of course, all the money I'm going to give you is pounds here. If you want it in dollars, add about 30% if you want to do a rough conversion. Now, 4 hours drive down to London in my hilariously awful clown car, and now it's sort of getting to a point where I only keep this car around to annoy everybody else because I can afford a better one, and yet I just keep this like 17-year-old piece of crap that still runs, quite frankly, and I'm going to run it until it dies on me. Anyway, 4 hours in that, which is totally unsuitable for the motorway, to be greeted and to be rewarded by a £7.50 lager shandy. For those who don't know, London is one of the bad things of London, I can say a lot of bad things about London, is it's incredibly expensive. And what's more expensive than the beer is the parking. Now, you can actually spend, I think we looked on an app, and the most expensive bit of parking near Wembley was £150 for the day. We found a parking app where people can put on their own driveways or their own property to park on. So we actually found one a few minutes walk away from the stadium itself for £40, and sadly that is a bargain price, but we got weirdly it was worth it for how much we could have ended up spending. Now, we get there a bit late, I'll talk about that in a second, but I managed to get floor seats about 20 seats back from ringside, which also happened to be the very back row. There was no one behind us, nothing but space, because where we were, everything else behind us was fenced off for production crew and for the giant swinging boom arm. So that was actually really, really good because, one, we were quite close to the ring. Two, the tickets were weirdly cheap for it being there. It was only £54 each, and like loads of other ground floor seats were not counting the ones really, really close to the ring, with the black barricades. Equivalent seats were going for like 180 or something like that. So for whatever reason, we got really good seats for really cheap. Anyway, as I was saying, the other good thing about it is we were right at the back of the floor seats, which means that we were the only row who could stand up during the event. So we're about 18 rows back, and for the most part, I just stood up during the entire event where everyone else had to sit down, so I had a great view of the ring. So very, very good. We arrived at the arena for the start of the Jungle Boy versus Hook pre-show match with 2 beers in hand, and I wasn't really watching, to be perfectly honest. It took me about 2 hours to realise that I'd missed the opening match, MJF Adam Cole versus Aussie Open. The doors actually opened at 5 p.m, and I thought that it'd take at least an hour for people to filter in, and apparently they were just doing the matches straight away. So we missed the first match, got there actually in the arena for the beginning of the second match, but wasn't really watching. Hook won a belt, apparently, and one thing I did notice is that Jungle Boy was very much loathed by the local crowd. Now, I go for a drink again, or whatever I'm doing, and I seem to have missed the first part of the CM Punk match versus Samoa Joe. I believe CM Punk at this point was fresh from fighting Jungle Boy in the back, and at this point I want to point out how moronic the layout of Wembley is, because we're on the floor seats. There are only, I think, 4 exits to actually get to the floor seats, whereas every 10 in between you can only get to whatever section you're in, and they don't mark it clearly in the stadium. So I'm just walking past and past and past, going to every single exit, trying to figure out how to actually get to the ringside to watch the match. So about 10 minutes into it, maybe not 10 minutes into it, but maybe about 5 minutes into the match, I finally get to my seat. One other thing I've not written in my notes here, I just want to say, is that the bar was suspiciously devoid of people. I mean, it was only 2 or 3 deep. Every other gig I've ever been, most of the gigs I go to, I went to go see Iron Maiden not too long ago, and you were waiting 20 minutes for a beer. What was a really long queue was for the merchandise line, which I thought was very telling as well. So they must have sold a buttload of merchandise. CM Punk versus Samoa Joe, for my money, was maybe the best match of the night, maybe second best. Easily better than a load of other supposed best matches of the night, in my opinion, because it was actually 2 heavyweights actually doing hard-hitting wrestling, and it felt like a proper wrestling match, old school style. You could actually hear the chops clearly from my seat as well, so they were really laying it in. Joe was the fan favourite, of course, and the CM Punk chants that were happening behind me were quickly shot down. The best bit was the Hulk Hogan leg drop and Hulk up thing that Samoa Joe was doing afterwards. Everyone loved that. Everyone laughed. Everyone had a great time with it. Punk wins with the Pepsi Plunge. I also need to add at this point that my favourite chant of the night happens, where everyone starts singing "Wheeler's got a gun, Wheeler's got a gun" to the tune of Casey and the Sunshine Band's "Give It Up." Then it's, as Dutch calls him, Takeshita and Bullet Club Gold versus the Golden Elite, and here's where I start playing Art Donovan and asking who everybody is and how much does that guy weigh. Now, I don't really follow AEW very much or New Japan, apart from like some clips where I need to watch them. I struggle to recognise everyone other than Omega and Paige. Now, I didn't really care about the match. I didn't really care for the match. The exact kind of match that is so over-rehearsed and underwhelming live, and it was just blah. And then I end up just chatting with people around me and not really paying attention. Now here is the same criticism for the Young Bucks versus FTR match, and I don't blame FTR for this. Here's Dave Meltzer's star rating for the match, even though it hasn't happened yet, so enjoy this little bit of video. Streamers explode and then get stuck into the scaffolding above the ring for the rest of the show, courtesy of the entrance of the Young Bucks. Now, the Young Bucks matches are like the previous match, so over-rehearsed, and the kicks and the knees look, to be honest, really phony live, especially when whatever tag team guy is on their knees, and then the other two do like a knee or a kick to the face kind of thing. It just looks so like weak, and there was like barely any like retraction of the leg, and it was like, it was just love tapping, and I just wasn't into it. And here's the really big thing, is that I don't know when I'm supposed to start getting exciting for a near fall, because there are so many near falls from so many finishes that everybody's kicking out of. And I don't think a lot of the fans around me either knew which like near falls to get excited over either, because like a finish would happen, a pinfall would be attempted, and the guy kicks out of two, and the entire audience is expecting it. And then that happens about 8 more times. And then I think it was only one near fall that like the fans like really got excited for and started cheering over. And I just didn't know like when to expect what. Quite frankly, it took me out of the match, and once again I was just chatting through it. And it's just the kind of match that I just do not like, that apparently loads of other people do like. One thing I do want to make mention of is that the Young Bucks, and I want to give props to them, were wearing Freddie Mercury era, a kind of Magic Tour outfits, you know, with the yellow jacket and the white trousers with like the gold and red stripes, because Freddie Mercury is great and Queen is great, and if you don't agree, we cannot be friends. A few Queen references actually happened throughout this evening, including Paige, or Saraya, or whatever she's called, coming out to We Will Rock You as well, so that was good. Next up is the 8-man Stadium Stampede match. Now, there's a camera set up right behind us, leading us to believe that some of the action is going to spill out over to around us. So I thought, right, great, we'll get a load of footage. But it turns out it was actually there for the entrance of Blackpool Combat Club. Now, I go for a whittle, and I rejoin the action halfway through. So the crowd behind, actually, not even behind me, I was walking down with drinks again, down the stairs, and everyone around was chanting Blackpool is a shithole, Blackpool is a shithole, na 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 na. And they're right, Blackpool is a shithole. I'm going there in a few weeks, in fact, as well, because it's got a theme park, so that's that. Normally, wouldn't think this match was my bag, at least if I watched it on TV, because it's more like a deathmatch thing. But to be honest, when I'm there live and I'm wincing at John Moxley getting that like skewer spike thing hammered into his head, and like the hook, the spike in it's tugging away at his scalp skin, my inner Dr. Nick Riviera shone through, you know, the one where Homer's boxing Dredrick Tatum and he's the fight doctor, and it's like, why isn't the doctor doing anything? He's going, kill him. Anyway, I really enjoyed it, to be honest. And there were a couple of bits at the end that were confusing for the viewer without the benefit of commentary to explain what's going on. At some point, quite near the end, like a glass of what looked like water was thrown at somebody, or like thrown on the ring or something like that, and everyone around me was just like, what is it? Turns out it was glass. We generally thought it was just water or something. It just didn't really, and I'm wearing my glasses, and no one could work out what it was, so it didn't really hit home with the live crowd. Orange Cassidy then puts his fist into a tub of what looked like porridge. And this is another thing where, unless you like follow AEW, I suspect every week, or you have the benefit of commentary explaining what this is. It didn't really make that much sense. Anyway, towards the end, Eddie Kingston returns. Fans very happy. Eddie hits people with a barbed wire chair and spears Moxley to a table with barbed wire on it in the corner. And then Orange Cassidy hits a custard punch on and pins Claudio. Fans are happy. Good entertainment. The other thing that I mentioned to my friend who was with, Chuck Taylor, looks like a father of 5 who got a day pass. And he's another person I had to ask who he was. Next match is the women's 4-way, which at first I thought was a tag team match because like Saraya and the blonde girl were like acting as friends or something, and then they weren't, and then like apparently the story of the match was like they were not getting along even though they were opponents, and no one really cared, and I just walked off and started chatting to people again. Then a 5th girl turns up who is Ruby Soho, I believe, with green hair. And here's another thing, like this happened in a few matches, is that people turned up who were just interfering, but they were all wearing their wrestling gear. And I thought that kind of thing died out in like the late WWF 80s, when, you know, people would dress in their wrestling gear just to interfere in a match, even if they didn't have a match on the card. And there was like Luchasaurus in one of the matches, I cannot remember which one, stopped like 2 people from interfering who were also in... Anyway. And I don't know who they were, because like one kid looks like a prepubescent child that he stopped like from interfering in the match. Anyway, whatever that match was. As far as the women's 4-way goes, no one was really into it. It wasn't very good. And then Paige wins somehow, and she seems emotional. And then next to me, the skinny lad who has just been not powering down pints, but just drinking them, starts getting really sloppy drunk and starts hugging me a lot, and then starts spilling drinks on me. And I was like, oh God, this is just going to be terrible. Luckily, as I say, he was quite skinny. He must have had maybe, I was watching him drink, he must have had about 4 or 5 pints. And then he starts slumping over. He actually climbs over the chairs to slump over into the guardrail behind and starts dribbling. So his friend has to take him off to like help him puke up somewhere, and then he's got rid of for the remainder of the show. So I had 2 empty seats next to me, which is great. So I had tons of space to stand around, swing my arms around, and just watch the show without like unencumbered from dribble and beer and being hugged. And I suspect that the lad next to me was a Southern Shandy Pants drinker from London, because he couldn't take 4 or 5 pints. Now, next match, Darby, Allin and Sting versus Christian Cage and Swerve Strickland. Now, I want to make mention of this match, especially because everybody loves Sting. He is still one of the biggest stars in wrestling, quite frankly, and the audience reaction treated him as such. Now, the Metallica theme doesn't hurt either. Seek and Destroy. I asked my friend why Sting looks to be wearing 8 layers of clothing instead of the original outfit. I don't know if he's just wearing Strides trousers these days, and a t-shirt, but I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's like a hardcore match or something, or maybe he had padding underneath because he was going to take some bumps, who knows. Onto the coffin, in fact. Right, okay, so it's not a coffin, it's a casket. Or is it a casket or a coffin? I can't remember. One of them's straight and one of them's like, you know, like a coffin shape, so I suspect that it was a casket match. Anyway, Sting looks unbelievable for his age. He looks unbelievable for a guy in his 40s, quite frankly, and he moves great as well, and he's definitely still one of the main draws. Darby Allin does some crazy bumps onto the casket, excuse me. One thing totally lost on the crowd that I actually did look up afterwards was that at one point Darby Allin and Sting put on hoodies. And I thought, oh, well, that's... In fact, my mate actually said, oh, they're modelling the new merchandise, you know, that's a really, really clever idea. No, apparently they had thumbtacks sewn in them or something like that. And that was part of the story. And when Christian... this is one of the only bits of the pay-per-view I've just watched back. At one point, starts sweeping the ring, and I thought it was for the glass in the previous match, or 2 matches ago. No, it's for the thumbtacks. So that was something that was totally lost on the crowd. Or it was on me anyway, unless you were watching every week, I suspect. Or have the commentators to explain it to you. Now, it's a casket match, so everyone takes turns in taking bumps onto it and into it, including some really scary ones, especially from Darby Allin. There was also bits where Darby Allin's hands were tied behind his back, and he was still doing like dives out in the ring that, thankfully, he executed flawlessly. And quite frankly, a lot of fun, actually, the match live. It's one of those things that I imagine I wouldn't have enjoyed as much if I wasn't there. But when you are there, you really enjoy all the hardcore stuff and all the big landings and all that kind of thing. Or maybe, you just get a bit more bloodthirsty when you had a couple of drinks in you, who knows. Now, Sting ends up in the box at one point, but when the lid's shut, he has the bat, and I think he has a baseball bat at one point, but at the beginning he has a cricket bat, I seem to remember, which is spray painted black. So it didn't... Which is another thing, right? I mean, one of them, it is a minor criticism, but there's a few things, like I mentioned with the glass and the thumbtacks, and the cricket bat that he had was painted jet black, so it wasn't obvious that it was a cricket bat, if you know what I mean, because it sort of blends in, it doesn't stand out. So if it was just like a regular, and I know it's black because Sting has a black bat, but it was, didn't really stand out to the crowd, and it took us a while to realise that was it. Anyway, what I was mentioning before is that Sting is about to be locked into the casket, and then he sticks a bat out so the lid can't be shut. And then Swerve Strickland ends up in the casket, and the lid is shut, and the referee calls for the bell, even though Swerve Strickland's dreadlocks were sticking out of the top end. Fix. It is here I'd like to point out that the true star of the show, this member of the ground staff, controlled Guy's hair. Now, if Mark the Beast Labette from The Chase had a son with himself, this would be him. Next match, Will Ospreay versus Chris Jericho, another contender for the best match of the night now, along with CM Punk and Samoa Joe. Fozzy do a live rendition of Judas. Will Ospreay is clearly a fan favourite, despite Don Callis' presence, who I would like to point out got unbelievable boos every single time, and very rarely was he actually on the big screen, but as soon as he was on the big screen, everyone would boo him. He's really hated, and I don't know if it's just like panto hate or people genuinely hate him, but it's good to see someone getting that kind of reaction. Now, I've seen very little of Will Ospreay, but it occurs to me that why there are people out there saying Omega, Kenny Omega, or the Young Bucks, or whoever, are saying, hey, this guy's the greatest wrestler in the world, when Will Ospreay exists, is a bit ridiculous to me, because like the high flying he was doing, which is flawless, really well executed, and made far more sense in the match, and looked far more hard hitting, and was far more realistic than, let's say, the Young Bucks match earlier. So, and in full disclosure, this is actually the very first Will Ospreay match I've watched completely all the way through. And he just came across as like a proper star. I mean, the promos weren't very good, but as a wrestler, he really comes across as something special. Now, as I'm starting to get tired, I've been on my feet and I've been driving all day, and my surgically repaired knee is starting to really bother me. So I stop really paying as much attention as I might have been doing, and then just start complaining instead and getting a bit tired. And keep in mind that I've got to drive home as well, so all I'm thinking of is what route I've got to take home at this point. Anyway, Billy Gunn and the Acclaimed versus House of Black. The Prince Andrew dig in the rap, Max Caster's rap at the beginning gets a big reaction. Everyone goes, oh, and that was a load of fun. People really in this match only care about Billy Gunn. He is in fantastic shape, but I've got to say, he was not really doing very much. It's like he was one of those things where he throws someone out the ring, but basically all he was doing is turning slightly and just going, bleh, and then, the other person would do all the work. But it doesn't matter, he's in his late 50s, everybody loves him. A match happens, I can't remember any of it. The Gun and the Acclaimed win somehow, and then they do the scissor thing, and people cheer. And then it's the main event. MJF versus Adam Cole for the AEW World title. Now, my first takeaway from this is MJF actually needs better music, because everyone seems to love Adam Cole's music, but MJF doesn't really hit that hard. So that, I think, needs to be changed. Now, by this time, as I said before, I'm exhausted. I really don't remember much of the match. And then I said I don't remember much of the match, and then I end up sort of writing down the entire match from memory. And they start off friendly with each other, and then they're unfriendly with each other. You know the whole thing. And then emotional turmoil as MJF is tempted by cheating, and then Adam Cole is tempted by Roderick Strong to cheat, and there are bits of cheating and a low blow here and there, and at some point they pass a chair to each other. So they're both in the ring. I think the referee's down at this point. I can't remember what the first referee bump was. I know the second one was from like a Canadian destroyer kind of thing. Anyway, there's a bit where they're like passing the chair to each other, and then one's catching, then the other's catching, and neither one wants the chair because neither one wants to cheat, or at least be caught cheating. And then MJF holds the chair, and then Adam Cole falls over and pretends to be dead, like, the whole Eddie Guerrero thing, and everyone cheers. So then MJF looks to the crowd and puts the chair on his head, and then he falls over. And it's very, very clever. We all thought it was really funny. It was a great little thing to do. The entire crowd loves it. And then everyone starts chanting, Eddie, Eddie, for the Eddie Guerrero homage in that sense. Let me see where I'm at with my notes. Okay, right, here's the other thing. And this may be wrong if I'm wrong here, but there's something illogical about that thing that happens if AEW titles can not switch on a disqualification or a count out. And the reason I say this is, why would Adam Cole want to pretend like he's been hit with a chair to get the referee to believe him and then disqualify MJF, who's holding the chair, so then Adam Cole wins by DQ and then doesn't win the belt? But I don't know if that's the rule in AEW. I suspect it is, but somebody in the comments correct me anyway. There's a simultaneous pin after a double clothesline, and then they restart the match because they both demand the match. Then MJF wins, and for the life of me, I can't remember how he wins. I think it might have just been from a roll-up, actually. But anyway, Roderick Strong comes in with a neck brace. He is ejected, and Adam Cole and MJF are still friends and favourites go off the final time. And everybody's happy, and everyone thinks it's a very good show. And then, at the end of the show, this announcement happens.
Boys and girls, we had such a great time here that guess what? We're doing it again next year!
So my main takeaways from the AEW All In Wembley show was that the show was ultimately a fun thing to witness live. It actually felt like a happening. It felt like something big and important. And there really were something like 81,000 fans there. Now, I actually saw on the BBC website that they described it as a sellout. It wasn't a sellout. There were quite a lot of empty seats where the hard camera was, and in the top of the bowl, the very highest portion of the stadium, where there were quite a lot of empty seats as well. I feel that if they'd filled all that up, the number would have been like, I don't know, 85 or 86,000. I don't know what it would have been, in my 90 for all I know, but 81,000, whatever it was, is a hugely, incredibly impressive number, especially for a debut in a country where they've never run before, at least live events. And I liked some of the matches. I thought some of the matches looked super phony and just took me out of them. I just didn't enjoy them. Surprised that I liked a lot of the hardcore matches live, because when you're there, that's what you want to see, to be honest. You want to see big stunts and just enjoy yourself, really. A couple of things I also want to take away is that I hate London. I hate driving. I hate driving in London. I hate the traffic in London. I hate the unbelievable expense of absolutely everything in London, and I couldn't wait to get back to Manchester and the rolling Cheshire Plains where I live, where true civilization exists and beers don't cost £9 a pint and parking is plentiful. Good night.